ఆర్టికల్ ఆఫ్ రైట్ టు ఫ్రీడమ్ వచ్చి ఆర్టికల్ 19. ఓకే, ఈ ఆర్టికల్ 19లో 6 రైట్స్ ఉంటాయి. దెర్ ఆర్ 6 రైట్స్ ఇన్ దిస్ article called article 19. What are those 6 rights? See, one is right to freedom of speech and expression. Right to freedom of speech and expression. There are six freedoms of article 19. Within this we'll be discussing these 6 freedoms in this class, and the first one is right to freedom of speech and expression, and then we have right to assemble peaceably, or right to assemble peaceably without any arms, that is, so right to assemble. And then right to form associations, associations like partnership firms, companies, political parties. These are, so so we'll be right to form associations ante even matter, right to form associations or unions or cooperative societies, even matter, so our cooperative societies. And then right to move freely, so basically talks about movement. So right to move freely throughout the territory of India. So within territory of India ante internal movement within territory of India ante oka state nunchi inkoka state, from one state to another state, moving from one state to another state is right to movement. So that is right to move freely throughout the territory of India. This is another. So we and then right to reside anywhere in India, right to reside and settle in any part of India. So to promote nationalism and to prevent parochialism, which is narrow-mindedness, so what happened is we have only one single citizenship. So like Miku, on contrary, in US you have federal country where there is a double citizenship. Kani within India we have what? We have only double citizenship. When it comes to India, we have only one citizenship, that is called as single citizenship. Whether you are part of center or whether you are part of state, you don't have double citizenship. We have only one single citizenship. So due to that, what happens is you can reside and settle in any part of India. That is right to movement. And then right to practice any profession, or to carry on any occupation, trade or business, unless and until it is immoral and it belongs to anti-national activities. Any profession can be carried out. So basically we'll be discussing about these 6 rights. Okay, these 6 rights we'll be discussing. Okay, and these 6 rights are related to article 19, and within article 19, this article 19 is only specifically available to citizens. See, article 19 is part of fundamental rights actually. So within fundamental rights, which is part 3, within within this fundamental rights we have many fundamental rights. Okay, within this we are specifically discussing about article 19, right to freedom. We are discussing article 19. Within this we are discussing 6 rights. Okay, and these are available only to citizens, not to foreigners. See, there are certain fundamental rights which are applicable to foreigners, and there are certain fundamental rights which are not applicable to foreigners. Like for example, article 15, 16, 19, 29 and 30. Article 15, 16, 19, 29 and 30 are not applicable to foreigners. These are not applicable to foreigners, whereas other articles are applicable to foreigners. So article 15, 16, 19. So this is article 19. Article 19 is not applicable to foreigners. It is only applicable to citizens. So this is the reason we are discussing this. And within this, let's start with first freedom. Okay, freedom of speech and expression. Right to freedom of speech and expression. This is the first right within article 19. So what happens is, what do you mean by right to freedom of speech and expression? Right to freedom of speech. I can speak anything and I can express anything. I can express positive opinion or negative opinion about any government. This is what is right to freedom of speech and expression. Word of mouth, in writing, in listening, anything. It can be anything. So right to freedom of speech and expression. So basically it talks about right to express his views, opinion, belief, okay, convictions freely by word of mouth, writing, printing and picturing. So any form of expression is nothing but right to freedom of speech and expression. So basically you can say that any advertisement is also a form of right to freedom of speech and expression. Okay, any advertisement, any telecommunication. So any form of right now I am teaching, right now I am explaining this topic. This is also right to freedom of speech and expression. Right to freedom of speech and expression. Okay, so this is part of freedom of speech and expression, which is part of Article 19. Okay, so what happened was there were certain, so Supreme Court, within this right to freedom of speech and expression, there are certain judgments given by Supreme Court. Within these judgments, there are many interpretations which happen to be within part of right to freedom of speech and expression. So ఏంటవి ఒకటొచ్చి see like right to propagate one's views as well as views of others. So right to propagate, I can support one view and I can talk about, I can support one view of others and I can also talk about them. That is nothing but right to propagate one's views and as well as views of others. And freedom of press, you know, telecommunication or freedom of media. So basically freedom of media or freedom of press is also part of right to freedom of speech and expression. Also freedom of commercial advertisement. See, freedom of commercial advertisement. So any commercial advertisement, which we see in a day-to-day lives, any commercial advertisement is also part of right to freedom of speech and expression, as well as right against tapping telephonic conversation. This is also part of right to freedom of speech and expression. Right to telecast, that is government has no monopoly over electronic media. So anyone can, so you have many private channels which has right to telecast. You have numerous channels, right? OTT platforms, YouTube, and then you have many private channels, Star Plus, Smart TV, anything. So they have right to telecast. Okay, you have many news channels which express their views, right? So all these are part of right to freedom of speech and expression and matter. Okay, right to freedom of speech and expression. So this is right to freedom of speech and expression, and within this there are other interpretations also. Right against band and freedom of silence. So being silent, so expressing, you not expressing any opinion is also right to freedom of speech and expression. Like I remain silent, I need not express any opinion. That is also what? That is freedom of silence. Freedom of silence ante enti? Freedom of silence ante basically you need not express any opinion. That is also right to freedom of speech and expression. Okay, when someone forces you to express opinion, you need not force, you need not express. So that is part of freedom of silence. And you know, so these are various judgments given by Supreme Court. So basically this is about freedom of speech and expression, okay, which is part of Article 19, right to freedom. Okay, then after right to freedom of speech and expression, and this right to freedom of speech and expression, these are not absolute. See, fundamental rights are not sacrosanct. Fundamental rights are not sacred. Why? Because they can be, they are not absolute. They are not complete and matter. So fundamental rights are not complete, but they are not absolute also. Endukante because you can exhibit restrictions on these fundamental rights. There are certain reasonable restrictions which can happen in fundamental rights. So these reasonable restrictions are to protect the sovereignty and integrity of India. To protect the sovereignty and integrity of India, manam konnisalu you can restrict these fundamental rights. Particularly Article 19 is restricted. Okay, due to protect the sovereignty and integrity of India. So there are certain reasonable restrictions. To protect what? To protect the sovereignty and integrity. Okay, so ఈ Article 19 absolute కాదు. So నోటికి వచ్చింది ఏ వాగడానికి లేదు. So there are certain aspects which you need to control. So these are not aspects, these are not absolute. Tarvata we have something called, we have another right called freedom of assembly. Okay, freedom of assembling. So congregate. So congregating, so where there is a congregation of people is nothing but freedom of assemble. So you have to assemble without any arms. You can assemble without any arms. See, every citizen has right to assemble. Every citizen has right to assemble peacefully without any arms. Okay, so you can demonstrate, you can go for protesting or any public meeting. Public meeting is part of congregation, demonstrations as well as processions. See, like Vinayak Chauthi processions, this is also freedom of assemble, right? So where you need not, where it has to happen peacefully, it has to happen peacefully without any arm. That is nothing but right to, so that is freedom of assembly. Freedom of assembly, which is part of Article 19. Okay, so this right does not include right to strike. So it doesn't mean that you can go and do right to strike. This is not there. Right to strike is not part of this. Then the state can impose, here also states can impose reasonable restrictions. State can impose reasonable restrictions on right to assemble on two grounds. What? One, to protect sovereignty and protect integrity, which happen with your first right, right? First right to freedom of speech and expression, right to freedom of speech and expression. There also there is a reasonable restrictions to protect sovereignty and integrity of India. Same reason is with your freedom of assembly also. In freedom of assembly also you have sovereignty and integrity. To protect sovereignty and integrity, what happens is freedom of assembly can be restricted. It need not happen. Okay, and then public order, public order including maintenance of traffic. To maintain a traffic also, right to assemble can be restricted. Okay, so to protect sovereignty and integrity, and to protect and to maintain law and order or public order. So to maintain public order or law and order, there can be reasonable restrictions of freedom of assembly. Like for example, we would have discussed, we discussed about, you might have heard about section 144, right? So freedom, just because there is a freedom called freedom of assembly, it's when there is a law and order situation, like let's say for example there is a communal clash in a district. So when you have a communal clash, what happens is it's very sensitive. It can lead to it will lead to law and order issues. It is a big headache to police. Okay, law and order. So what happens? They will see to it that you are not in group. Okay, so district magistrate will proclaim. District magistrate will magistrate will order section 144, where there can't be group of persons. And this group of you can't walk in a group of 4 or 5 members. So that freedom of assembly can't be there during such scenarios, to maintain law and order. So freedom to assemble, though it's part of fundamental rights, it's not absolute. Okay, so when there is a communal clash, or when there is a regional clash, or when there is a language clash, or anything, any kind of clashes, what happens is to protect the law and order, or to maintain law and order, we have to not assemble on matter. You should not assemble during these scenarios. Okay, so this is about freedom of assembly. And then we have another freedom within right to, another freedom within Article 19, which is freedom of association. Freedom of association. So what, you can form any kind of association from Article 19. So any kind of association, it can be a political organization, it can be a company, forming a political party, forming a company, or forming a, business partnership firms, forming a society, forming a club, forming organizations, forming trade unions. These are all nothing but to form associations. So right to form associations, right to form associations give you right to form many kind of congregations, not congregations, but clubs, organizations, or trade unions, and political parties, companies, partnership firms, all these kind of aspects can be formed because of freedom of association. All citizens have right to form associations or unions or cooperative societies. So all these aspects can be formed because of one freedom or Article 19 called freedom of association. Okay, and then it covers negative right not to form or join any association or union. The right to obtain recognition of association is not a fundamental. See, the right to obtain recognition. So the right to obtain recognition of these associations or political parties or clubs or any aspects, any organization, it doesn't come under this article. Only what? Right to form. Only right to form, but not right to recognize. So there is a difference. Okay, so freedom of association is another aspect of Article 19, which we discussed. And then we have something called freedom of movement. So what do you mean by freedom of movement? Moving from one place to another place. It can be from one state to another state. It can be from one district to another district. It can be from one district of one state to another district of another district. So you have right to freely move from one place to another. Okay, why? Because we have a single citizenship in India. Because of single citizenship in India, you can move anywhere freely. Okay, and that too internal movement. So right to freedom of movement talks about freedom of movement internally within India. Ante enti? From one state to another. Let's say from Meghalaya to Andhra Pradesh, from Telangana to Andhra Pradesh, from Telangana to Orissa, from Bengal to Jharkhand, or any states. So this is called internal movement. Okay, the internal movement is this internal movement is protected by Article 19. See, we are still in Article 19. We are just discussing what are the parts of Article 19. Okay. ఈ Article 19 లో రైట్ టు మూవ్మెంట్ అన్నది ఏంటంటే ఇట్ ఓన్లీ టాక్స్ అబౌట్ ఇంటర్నల్ మూవ్మెంట్. మీరు అడగచ్చు దెన్ వాట్ ఈస్ ఎక్స్టర్నల్ మూవ్మెంట్. ఓకే, సో యూ మైట్ ఆస్క్ వాట్ ఈస్ ఎక్స్టర్నల్ మూవ్మెంట్. ఎక్స్టర్నల్ మూవ్మెంట్ అంటే వేర్ యూ మూవ్ అవే ఫ్రమ్ కంట్రీ. You move away from India to other country. You move away from India to US. You move away from India to Kazakhstan. You move away from India to Russia and Russia to India. This is external movement. Okay, this external movement is protected by right to life and personal liberty, which is Article 21. In Article 21, so what happens is Article 21 protects your external movement, whereas Article 19, which is part of right to freedom of movement protects your internal movement, which is from one district to another district, one state to another state. Understood? So internal movement is protected by Article 19. External movement is protected by Article 21, right to life and personal liberty. See, let's see this freedom entitles citizens to move freely throughout the territory of India or country. Okay, throughout the territory of India. It has two dimensions. See, it has two dimensions. One is internal movement and then it has external movement. Internal movement ante right to move inside the country. Okay, protected by Article 19. It is protected by Article 19. Internal movement is protected by Article 19. And then we have second dimension which talks about external movement. External movement ante enti? So right to move out of the country and right to come back to the country. Okay, this is protected by what? This is protected by Article 21, right to life and personal liberty. Okay, external movement is protected by Article 21, which is right to life and personal liberty. Okay, and this also has certain restrictions. ఈ right to movement kuda there are certain restrictions. See, ఇష్టం వచ్చినట్టు you can't move as you like anywhere. Like say, let's say we have certain tribal habitations or tribal settlements. Okay, so you don't have right to move inside tribal habitations because they have separate culture, they have separate society, they have separate socio-cultural aspects. So you can't go and meddle with those cultural aspects. Okay, just like for example Andaman and Nicobar Island, there you still have food and a hunting gathering society there. So you can't move to that society, you can't move to that particular tribal habitations. There is a restriction. So fundamental rights ఏం చెప్పిందంటే బేసికలీ ఇట్ గేవ్ సర్టన్ పవర్ ఆర్ సర్టన్ అథారిటీ టు ట్రైబల్ హ్యాబిటేషన్స్ వేర్ నో అదర్ పీపుల్ క్యాన్ సెటిల్ ఇన్సైడ్ దిస్. They can't move inside the tribal habitations, they can't move inside the tribal areas. This is one word. And as well as movement of prostitutes. So prostitutes are prone to HIV virus and particularly AIDS, right? So they also should be restricted from movement. So these are two restrictions when it comes to Article 19. Within Article 19, freedom of movement. Within Article 19, freedom of movement. Okay, so these are the restrictions and matter, which is tribal areas as well as movement of prostitutes. And then we have other freedom, which is freedom of residence. So freedom of residence or freedom to settle. You can reside permanently or temporarily in one area. So you can reside or settle in any part of India throughout India. You can reside anywhere because of one single citizenship. See, like Biharis, any person from Bihar can settle in Telangana. Any person of Telangana can settle in Orissa. He can settle in Bihar. He can settle in UP. So with this what happens is narrow-mindedness anedi pothundannamata. With this what happens is it promotes more nationalism. So you can settle. We see many people, right? We see many Marwadis who are from other states settled in Hyderabad. We see many Tamilians. We see many Malayalis. We see many Bengalis. You have many. It's a unity in diversity. We have much diversity in India. So anyone can settle anywhere. Anyone in the sense, citizen of India. If you are a citizen of India, you can settle in any part of India. Okay, so that is freedom of residence. So what happens is, see, every citizen has right to reside and settle, in any part of the territory of country. That is temporarily, he can reside temporarily, for job purpose, or then you can reside permanently, or after job you might reside permanently in that country. You might reside permanently in that country or in that state or any state. Okay. the right is intended to move internal barriers. It is intended to move the internal barriers. So what happens is, by removing internal barriers, it promotes nationalism. It promotes nationalism and it excludes parochialism. అంటే ఏంటి, narrow mindedness ని తీసేస్తుంది అనమాట. It promotes more nationalism. Nationalism అంటే to promote nation, you promote one country, you know, this is nationalism. So this promotes nationalism, this promotes nationalism and avoids narrow mindedness, which is parochialism. And then ikkada kuda you have certain reasonable restrictions when it comes to residence. Same restrictions like your, where you can't, like same you know, it has more or less same restrictions like right to freedom of movement. Ikkada endante right to residence ante you can't reside in tribal habitations because they have again separate society, separate socio-cultural aspects, separate, you know, social dimension, everything. So one, outsiders can't reside in tribal habitations. So these are one of the reasonable restrictions happen to be to your freedom of residence. So these are not absolute. So which means that these are not absolute. Okay. So right to, outsiders can't reside in tribal habitations, and right to movement and right to residence. So here if you see, right to movement and right to residence, both of them are overlapping with each other. So that is why they are also complementary to each other anamata. Right to freedom of residence. Okay. And then we have last right, which is freedom of profession. Freedom of profession ante is nothing but a job. Okay. So in India you can profess or you can practice any profession. In India you can practice any kind of profession unless and until it is immoral. So it should not be immoral, it should not be anti-national, it should not be threat to your country. So bomb making or such kind of activities should not be there. But any other activities, like see, any profession to carry on, so any profession which gives you means of livelihood, any occupation, any trade or any business which gives you means of livelihood can be practiced anamata. So it should not be immoral, it should be moral anamata. Okay. So this is about your article 19, which has 6 freedoms. Okay. Thank you. Ensape 20 minutes saripotunda 20